Hello, Dublin. Same response. Thanks very much. It's really great to be given this award. I didn't know Peter Wildy, but I know people who did know him, and I thought he was a great person and a great educator. And so I'm honored to get this. And what I'd like to tell you today is how I do this lofty statement, educating the world. 20 years ago, this would be impossible. But with today's technologies, it's easy to do it, and I think many of you can do it as well. So I work at Columbia University, which is right there at the northern tip of Manhattan in New York City, and my lab is in this building right here. We have a great view of the George Washington Bridge, and when I record podcasts, as you'll see, we look out the window and get inspired by history. So what I'm going to tell you about today is about using the new media to educate people about microbiology. And I'm going to tell you about 3 different ways that I use new media. I'm going to tell you about blogging. I'm going to tell you about podcasting, an example of that we just did, of course, here, and some other social media tools that I use to do that. So what is new media? New media is something that you decide to consume on your own. It's not pushed at you. You can typically get it on a digital device of some kind, a computer, an iPod, an iPad, a tablet of some sort, an Android device. You get it yourself. But another characteristic of it is that it encourages user feedback. You can form a community around new media. And that allows for interactivity and questioning and commenting and so forth. It also leads to the democratization of making new media. You create, you publish, you distribute on your own. You don't need agents, you don't need expensive infrastructures. Anyone can do this. This is true democracy in media. And in practice, it involves the internet, websites, computer multimedia, as you will see. So that's an example. And these are just some of the applications that you can use to create and consume this new media. But first, let me tell you a bit about myself. I'm a typical academic virologist. I've been trained as such. I did a PhD with Peter Wildy, actually working on influenza viruses a long time ago. I did a postdoc with David Baltimore, and that's where I learned to do polio research, which we continue to do to this day. I've had a laboratory with PhD students and postdocs. It's been funded by the NIH and a few other agencies, and we've done the typical academic research route. But early on in my career, I really enjoyed presenting and teaching. And as I worked more, I did more of that. Now, at a medical center such as Columbia, teaching is typically not rewarded. It's not necessary. It's something that you can do, but I really enjoyed it, and I got good feedback, so I did it more and more. And about maybe 10 years ago, maybe a little more, I was asked by Jane Flint, Lynn Enquist, and Ann Scalca to join them in the writing of a virology textbook. And it was called Principles of Virology. It's now in its 3rd edition, so it's been very successful, and at the time it was a different way to write a virology book. It did not address the topic by virus or family, but rather by process. Let me give you an example of what I mean. This is the table of contents of the 2 volumes. We currently make it in 2 volumes, one on molecular biology and one on pathogenesis. It's split into 2 volumes, so it's lighter, and you can put it in your backpack and take it around with you, although that will soon be irrelevant as well. And you can see on the left we have chapters based on stages in the replicative cycle of viruses. And then in the pathogenesis section, immune defenses, transformation, vaccines, antiviral, etc. So it was a bit different from the traditional textbook, but more importantly, it required that all of us learn viruses outside of the ones we worked on. And so we each authored about 5 chapters each. And so, for example, in authoring attachment and entry, I had to learn about the attachment of entry of many different viruses and then synthesize the principles from that. So that got me thinking about a lot of different viruses. So this was really the first step on my journey to educating the world about microbes. So this is in its third edition. We are thinking about doing a fourth edition, but I don't think it should be a traditional textbook. I don't think a paper textbook is what is needed. I think electronically is the future, of course, but not just a PDF. It has to be interactive, multimedia, and accessible. And I'm not sure that we can do that yet, but we'll see. We're currently thinking about that. Now, at about the time, maybe about 5, 6, 7 years ago, maybe a bit longer, blogging, it is longer, 12 years ago, blogging had become very popular, and the software and the tools were now accessible to everyone. And I started, as a scientist, I'm curious, and I'm curious about many things, and I was curious about this new thing called blogging. And I began to read other people's blogs, and I thought it was pretty interesting that anyone could write a blog and people would read it and go to it and comment on it. So I decided to take this information that I had learned in writing this book and write a blog about viruses. I thought this was a good way to move beyond the readership of this textbook. So I started what I call Virology blog. Here it is on June 9th, 24. That was my first post. And I designed it myself. It's evolved over the years, but I wanted to make it simple and appealing. And the first post I wrote was called Are Viruses Living? Which has evoked more debate than maybe anything else that I've written about over the years. And it's a very interesting debate because there's no answer perhaps, but you can just debating whether viruses are living or not is instructive. It makes you understand what is life. So I simply wrote this and posted it, and to my surprise, people discovered it without any advertising, just through search engines, and conversations evolved. So each blog post, of course, has a conversation area or comments area where you can comment. I let anyone comment and take away the ones that are nasty or inappropriate or just spam, and you can see that people start to write what they think. And I've gotten to know some of these individuals over the years. They're not all scientists, which is very interesting. And you can see people posting their opinions, people answering, and this has been quite a long conversation since then. Now, in terms of conversations, this can get very extensive. I've noticed it has grown over the years, so every post that I do attracts more and more conversation, and this one is an example. This was a post I wrote during the XMRV controversy. Many of you probably know that for a few years it was suggested that the retrovirus XMRV might be a cause of chronic fatigue syndrome. And this was a post in which one of the workers in the field, Ela Singh, had published a paper saying there's no virus in patients with chronic fatigue syndrome. And I typically will take a finding such as this and try to explain it in straightforward language. And you can see here there were 532 comments on this post up until a few weeks ago. That's quite an engagement for a subject. And this is largely because a lot of patients with the disease have come and visited the blog to learn about the disease. So you can access many people by this kind of activity in a meaningful way. So what else do I write about? Well, this is one example trying to explain stories that are in the news. Another one, of course, has been the H5N1 story, which I first wrote about back in December of last year. And this has been another of those stories that has been quite involved. And this is a bit different because here we don't have a publication, which I usually like to refer to. And as you heard Ron say earlier, we all make mistakes because we don't know what is about to be published. But anyway, this is another way that we've engaged a lot of people. This has been an interesting debate, and Ron has even himself commented on some of these stories. So I think this is a really good way to get the public and scientists together, because if they're there and they see a scientist commenting, it's a great way to bring people together. As you'll see later, one of the things that people like about blogs and podcasts, as we'll see, is that they give them access to scientists. Scientists are relatively inaccessible. People don't know how to contact a scientist, and they feel that we are off working in closed places and we don't talk to them, but this provides a way to do that. I also talk about news in the viral world. Norton Zinder, for example, passed away earlier this year. Why should people care about Norton Zinder? His obituary was in the New York Times, but it really didn't say what he did. So I explained that he had discovered transduction in bacteriophages. He discovered the first RNA bacteriophage, and I think this is more than you would find in a New York Times obituary. I also write about basic virology that is based on what is in the textbook. So I can take figures, in fact, which are shown here. Here it's viral neutralization by antibodies, and this is also something that's very, very appreciated by the readers. I also have my opinions about things, and I mark them as such. Because I think we should have opinions on things that are happening. And during the 2009 H1N1 pandemic, I had some thoughts about what was going to happen next. I also, for a while, published some experimental results from the lab. I actually had been doing some experiments in the fall of 2009 on zinc inhibition of rhinovirus replication. And as I did them, I would put the results up here and talk about them. And I was really amazed at the interaction that this generated. A lot of people started giving me suggestions about what to do, and I got some good suggestions, in fact. It's unfortunate that we can't do science in an open way this way, because as you know, it's very competitive. But I think it's good for something like this to teach the public how science works. So I had week after week of failure for various reasons with these experiments, and I documented them so the public can see how frustrating science is, and when something does work, how you take it from there. So when people come to this blog, what are they looking for? These are some statistics that we can easily get because of the software that's used for blogging. My blog is on a WordPress platform on an independent website, but there are many analytical tools provided with that. These here are the top pages that are visited on the blog. You can see, I think this was a survey I had done for the previous month. So our virus is living still is one of the top pages that people look at. Detecting viruses, the plaque assay. A lot of people want to know how a plaque assay works. Structure of influenza virus, HeLa cells, and influenza virus transmission. People get here by searching sometimes. They search for HeLa cells a lot. The blog itself, Our Virus is Living, is a common Google search term, plaque assay. And if Google is a top referrer, so Google is very important to be connected with. You have to optimize what you do so it shows up in searches that are done. This is called search engine optimization. And Facebook is another big source of visits. And of course, Facebook has over 500 million members. And so just by default, even if you don't like it, if you want to spread the word, it's very important to do that. So who's reading this? I'll tell you later how I use my blog in my virology course at Columbia, but also the rest of the world. And this is a map of the world where these countries are coded according to the hits. These are all-time visits over the life of the site, 1.5 million. And you can see that the U.S., of course, has the highest visitation, followed by Canada, and then many other countries. Almost every country in the world has visited, someone in the country has visited a virology blog. A few countries in Africa, and Greenland doesn't like it, I suppose. These are some more numbers just to give you an idea. Now, when you look at YouTube, my son was showing me a video the other day that had, in one day, 4 million hits. So that is truly viral. This is not as viral, but I think it's pretty good for an academic subject. This is a chart of the visits to the site by month since 2008 to the present. And you can see there are some spikes of activity where monthly you're reaching 100,000 visits per month, which is pretty good. I think this spike here was about when the H1N1 vaccine was released. You can sometimes correlate spikes in activities with things that happen. We also had a big spike in the end of 2011, the beginning of 2012, again, I think because of the H5N1 discussions. But this is ranked by country, as you can see. So we have visits largely from the US, Canada, UK, India, Australia, Germany, Philippines, Netherlands, Mexico, etc. So we have a pretty good distribution, especially considering that this is an English language blog. Someday there will be software that translates anything immediately on the fly into every language. And right now you have to copy and paste it into Google Translate, which is more than what most people want to do. But it will be done on the fly someday, and this will be accessible to even more people. So this is a great way to reach a lot of people. I continue to do this. I do it about once a week. I write something, if something is going on, more frequently. And I think I'm doing a job of educating people about viruses, drawing from my textbook and my research experience. Now, you can do this as well. If I were going to start today, here's what I would do. There are two simple sites where you can start a blog in about 5 minutes, posterous.com or tumblr.com. You just open an account, you give it a name. You could call it virus.tumblr.com or virology.tumblr.com. Those are probably all taken. The same with Posterous. So you don't have to buy any hosting. You don't have to buy a domain name. You just sign up, and immediately you have templates with which to blog. It's very simple, no work to do at all, and you can customize it as you wish. So I recommend that you try it because there's a lot of expertise out there in many fields, and it's pretty easy to do. It takes time, of course. And it's not for everyone, but there are a lot of voices that I think should be shared. Now, speaking of voices, let me tell you about the next phase of my teaching efforts, which is podcasting. And this began because I have a horrendous commute every day. This is the northeastern United States right here. Here is Long Island and New York, New Jersey. And this is where the lab is here in the northern reaches of Manhattan. And this is where I live in Point B. It's 62 kilometers apart. And I drive this back and forth every day. And listening to the radio is really horrible because you have to listen to what they want you to listen to. So the radio is not new media. And I discovered podcasting because I was getting tired of listening to what was on the radio, and I found that with a podcast you can tailor your listening to whatever you want. You can have a playlist for every ride, and I could learn about just about every field. And the way I discovered podcasts was through the iTunes store at Apple. And now there are many other ways to do this, but at the time, in 2008, this was the main collection area for podcasts. So if you go to the iTunes store, this is a screen capture of it. They sell television, they sell music, but up here in the upper right, they have podcasts. And these are all the different categories that you can find podcasts in. And I found science and technology podcasts were quite interesting. So I listened to a lot, and I really liked the format. I particularly like discussion-type podcasts. And at one point, one of the podcasts that I listened to, the host said, if you're passionate about something, you can do a podcast about it. And I had known for years that I was very passionate about viruses. I thought I had a good background, so I said, let me do this. And I engaged a colleague at Columbia, Dixon Despommier, and we started This Week in Virology in the fall of 2008. And here's myself with Dixon. Dixon is a retired professor. He was a parasitologist in his years at Columbia and very interested in teaching. He was the perfect person, and he and I would sit down and just discuss stories. He would ask me questions, and people started listening. After a while, I brought in two additional people. I brought in a science writer, Alan Dove. Alan had gotten his PhD with me working on polio and had a very successful science writing career. I thought he would be a good voice to add. And then Rich Condit, a pox virologist at the University of Florida. And so I had a cadre of co-hosts, and between us we talk about what goes on in virology. And the show has evolved enormously since we started. Let me give you a flavor about what we do. Of course, today we did one here live, and we often do live shows whenever we can. These are conversations. My original vision for the podcast was to record all the conversations that we have every day. You sit down for lunch, you have great conversations about viruses and experiments, and nobody ever hears them. So I said, let's sit down and just talk and record it. So we have conversations about viruses, which are focused by a paper or two or something that's going on in science. We also have episodes we call Virology 101. It's like a lecture. I show slides, except everyone talks about what's on the slides. And this is an easier way to learn virology than by a formal lecture, if you will. Sometimes we have guests. on the show, we have people calling in via Skype, and we talk about their work, or perhaps they participate in a paper discussion as well. And then we have what we call TWIV Live, which is what we did today. Here is a recent TWIV Live at the University of Michigan, where Rich Condit and I went, and we had two local guests, Alice Telesnitsky and Kathy Spindler. And this is done in front of an audience, and we record it. It's a lot of fun. We've also done TWIV Lives at the ASM meetings. We've been to various universities. I had over 10 in 2011, and we have a number for this year. Now, when I get invited to give a seminar, they also say, would you like to do a TWIV while you're here? And I can engage local virologists and have a really good conversation. So this is just a lot of fun. I think it's a great resource because I can go and give seminars and engage virologists. Now, I would love to take Rich Condit or Alan Dove with me. Maybe someday we'll be able to do that. Here's an example of a typical web page. So in addition to putting the audio file on iTunes and many other places, we have a website. It's very important to do that when you have a podcast so people know where to go if they have questions or if they want references. So we have for each episode a website. These are made as blog posts, so each episode has its own URL. We have who's on the show, a little summary, and you can play the episode right here. You can download it. You can subscribe. We make everything easy. That's the key with internet stuff, to make it easy. No more than one click is the key. We have links. These are basically references for everything we talk about. And then, of course, our science picks, which you heard today. Each of us picks something in science, a paper, a book, a movie, anything related to science that we like to recommend. And that's been a lot of fun as well. Here's an example of another live TWIV. This was at the ASM GM in New Orleans last year, where I had a number of guests up on a podium discussing papillomaviruses, bacteriophages, and the genetic conflict between virus and host. So these are a lot of fun because many people go to meetings, as you know, and you get a few of them and sit down and have a conversation. Our guests have been many. We've had over 100 guests, I think, on TWIV, including David Baltimore for our 100th episode, Lynn Enquist, Adolfo Garcia Sastre, Peter Palese, Scott Hammer. I even went to a high school and did a TWIV there. I did one other high school TWIV. And I think this is really something that high school students like, to go there and record one with the students. It's just great. So you can't do that all the time, but it's a lot of fun. So you can see some of the other guests we have had. And so if we call you and ask you to come on, it's a lot of fun. You don't have to prepare. You just talk about your work. We also get a lot of interactivity with the podcast. From the beginning, people started sending us questions. This is just a little snapshot of my email inbox, sorted by TWIV only. These are all TWIV emails, and you can see a couple a day coming in. Questions about all aspects of virology, things that we talk about, but also we don't talk about it. We get questions, we get suggestions for episodes. You heard today someone commenting on an episode that we had written. So this, I think, is the best aspect, that we have interactivity with the audience. We typically spend about a third of each show answering email questions, and this is really loved by the audience. In fact, they have developed new ways to address us, dear TWIVers, TWIVites, TWIVists, even TWIVome, and TWIVidy. So it's really a nice community that we have developed. Here are some stats for you. These are TWIV listeners from, I think this is the past, this is a year period, March to March, the last year. And you can see every time we release an episode, we have a spike of downloads. And this was a big spike in the beginning of 2012 here, again, H5N1 related. But just in this 1 year period, 650,000 downloads, which is really good. I mean, it's not YouTube activity, but it is really good for a science podcast. And remember, we do very little advertising. This is mainly word of mouth. ASM has helped us very much by displaying this on their website, microbeworld.org, and also in their magazine, Microbe. But we have not gone beyond that. And I think if we advertised in other media, we would have even more downloads than this. So you can see this big spike of download activity in February, 95,000 downloads in 1 month. Again, I think that's influenza related. These are episodes listed by the most downloaded down, so you can see 16,500 downloads for this particular episode is the most. They get about 8,000 downloads each, but it increases because they're all archived online and you can access them anytime. And the most popular one, interestingly, is one which we called CSI Virology, where we talked about a paper where they used forensic molecular biology to solve a case of HIV transmission. So it's always interesting to see what are the most popular. This is one of more recent ones where we talked about how B cells are selected in the germinal centers of lymph nodes. And this was a really popular one where we had a guest explain that as well. So who is listening? We can tell because we get emails, and they tell us often, I'm an electrical engineer, I am a truck driver, and I love listening. So we get high school students, college students, a lot of graduate students, but not all virology students, medical students, postdocs, professors in all sorts of fields, a lot of people in the IT profession, programmers and people who work on computers, healthcare people, physicians, nurses, EMTs, and a lot of non-professionals. And I can tell you we have letters from sanitation engineers, painters, laborers, policemen, mailmen, all sorts listen. I think this is just really amazing. And again, the TWIV listeners are global. Now Greenland is getting into the act here. Here they have downloaded some TWIV episodes there. But again, 181 countries, territories, most every country in the world. Again, it's English, so it's not as accessible as it could be. One day there will be software to translate on the fly, because I don't think we can find experts in every language that can do this at the moment. I think the key to this is having someone who works in virology to do these kinds of podcasts. We have great fans. As I've already hinted, we get a lot of email from them. One fan made drawings of all four of us. This is a fan down in Australia who did a caricature. I guess he could find pictures of us online, so he did this. I think this is really great. So we build on this to get more people engaged. We have merchandise. So we have as I'll show you, we have a store where we sell merchandise. Many fans have made transcripts. That is, they listen to an episode and type it out and make a PDF and they send it to us. And I have a note on the website. If you want to transcribe some episodes, send me an email. And a lot of people have. I think we have about 15 or so transcripts. And this is hard to do, so we appreciate it. But a lot of people do like to have a transcript of the conversation. And as I said, we have merchandise. We have mugs, we have iPhone cases, shirts, all sorts of things with the TWIV logo. We don't make very much money on this. The point is to spread the word. I saw someone the other day, now it was a virologist, but they had an iPhone case with TWIV on it. I think it's just to generate conversation. If you're in an airport and you have a TWIV t-shirt, someone will come up to you, what is that? And you start talking about it, you spread the word. And also to build further a community. So we also build a community on Facebook. As I said earlier, Facebook has a lot of people. So not too long ago I made a fan page. We have over 1,800 fans right now here and grows all the time. People are very comfortable here because they use Facebook all the time, so a fan page is easy for them to come to. I put pictures here. So yesterday while we were setting up the streaming with Chris, we took photos and I put them here yesterday. All the posts go here, so the TWIV episodes get automatically loaded onto Facebook, so you can click and listen right here. People send us hints, they make comments. It's just another way to engage with our audience in a way that the audience really likes. So we get lots of great comments. On iTunes, we are always ranked very high because of the comments that we get there. Let me just share some of those with you. An absolutely terrific podcast with entertaining guest dialogue and always changing topic matter. The dialogue between hosts is sincere and amusing as they interject, challenge one another, and occasionally get off track. Their enthusiasm is infectious. Friendly companions for the office or on long road trips. These guys have done well making virology interesting for non-science-minded folks. Great banter between hosts, extremely informative, while being accessible to people without any background in virology or college-level biology. They break it down and stay on topic while bringing in related cases. And here I like this one. They engage in a dialogue that is so refreshingly intelligent, it almost doesn't matter what they are discussing. So this is just a fraction of the hundreds and hundreds that we get. So based on TWIV's popularity, I said to Dixon, who was a parasitologist, I said, let's start at one on parasites. So this is he and I sitting down talking about various parasites, and it's hosted at microbeworld.org, which is an ASM website. And we have had, I think, 37 podcasts in This Week in Parasitism, or TWIP, to date. We went through the first 30 or so, covering all the basic medically relevant parasites. Here's one of the last ones we did, dracunculiasis, or guinea worm. And Dixon has taught this for 30 years. He's an expert. He's done research on them. So I ask the questions, and Dixon fills me in. We have the same kind of format that we have for TWIP. This has been also quite popular. We don't release this as frequently, maybe once a month. But over the history of the podcast, we've had 222,000 downloads. Again, there's always a spike as we release each episode. We have a very faithful following here. It's smaller than TWIV, but some people just like parasitology. I think it's a great subject. I know very little about it, so I think it serves a purpose. A couple of comments on TWIP. I've been listening to lots of tech podcasts because I found them interesting, while finding the biology ones a little dry. Both TWIV and TWIP are absolutely excellent and are causing me to seriously consider entering the field of parasitology. So I think this is great. We see this quite a bit, that people are thinking of going into fields, virology, parasitism, microbiology, as you will see, because they listen to us. Here's a fellow who runs a home building company and with little formal scientific training, but he has a desire to enlighten himself. Through your podcast, I've discovered a new world of beautiful complexity and mystery in the branch of science. As a listener without formal training, I'd like you to know that using technical terms and jargon is okay. I regularly Google terms I don't understand as the show progresses. I recommend this to any listener. And one of our listeners named his dogs after us. Here's Vincent and here's Dixon. I think that's the ultimate compliment, right? They're good-looking dogs, too. Actually, this is a listener from Tanzania, I believe. So then we started at the beginning of 2011, This Week in Microbiology, which should be TWIM, microbeworld.org/TWIM. And this is covering bacteria, so this is not an area that I know a lot of, but I'm familiar with a great deal of it. So I engaged a few people who have worked in the field, Michael Schmidt, Elio Schechter, Joe Handelsman, from time to time Stan Malloy also joins us. And here are two examples of recent episodes, and again we give them titles. An inflamed gut is good for salmonella. We talked about how inflammation allows salmonella to compete with fermenting gut microbes. We usually talk about two different papers, and here magnetotactic bacteria and drug-resistant tuberculosis. And again, I ask the questions, and the others who are experts clarify. Elio is particularly wonderful. He's had a lifetime of experience in microbiology, and I'm very grateful that he does this with us. He has a very nice blog called Small Things Considered that some of you may know. TWIM is also popular, 166,000 downloads since its inception just over a year ago. We do this once every other week, so it says on a regular schedule. A few more comments. Here's one from a truck driver. I've been driving an over-the-road truck the last few months, and finding intellectually stimulating material is the greatest challenge out there. Thank you for this podcast. Your lively discussions really help with the tedium of driving. I'm sure I'm not the target demographic, but your time is appreciated. Here is one who has compared me to Feynman, which is very flattering, but he was really superb. His podcasts actually put most of the published TV new informational programs to shame. I'm an electrical engineer, and it feels like leaps of knowledge in biology, microbiology, and virology when I spend an hour weekly listening to any of them. Let me say thanks for all the work you do and the great discussions. I'm a high school science teacher, and you are my professional development. I absolutely love your podcast. I hope you never stop producing it. I count on the three of you to keep me up to speed on some of the most interesting virus research being published, and look forward to downloading the podcast every Sunday evening. As I said, these are just a handful. We have inspired other people to do podcasts. Michael Walsh, an epidemiologist, does the Germlines, about the movement of infectious diseases through populations from an epidemiological viewpoint. We've had him on TWIV twice. This Week in Pediatric Oncology by Timothy Kripe, And coming soon, a number of Spanish-speaking students and postdocs are going to do Esta Semana in Virologia, or something similar in name. And there will also be a podcast about the history of science called Sequencing Science coming soon. And the maker of that one will be on TWIV soon, so look out for that. Right, now, as I said earlier, teaching at a medical center like Columbia isn't required, but about 3 years ago, I had done teaching of various level students for many years, medical students, undergraduates, and I really enjoyed it, particularly the undergraduates. I often taught in Lynn Enquist's virology course at Princeton once a year. So I decided to start a virology course at Columbia, and there had not been one at Columbia since the 1980s. And this is the undergraduates, which is a separate campus from where we work. It's about a mile away from us. And this class started with 40 students, and the second year it had 70, and now this year we have 90 students. And the room is packed. It's really popular. It's an elective course, but students really like virology. Plus, they like the fact that I use social media to teach. I use my podcasts and blogs, and they think it's cool to have someone who does a podcast teach them virology. In fact, about half of the students come here through the podcast. So these are Columbia undergraduates of various majors, some science, some engineering, some other fields as well. And here we are on the first day of spring this year, and they're wondering why I'm taking their picture, which reminds me that I have to take yours as well before I forget, because it's just a matter of engaging everyone. If you take a picture wherever you go, then they see what scientists do. So smile, everybody. Thank you. All right, what do I do with this course? So first of all, I give them assignments from the blog. I give them podcasts to listen to before the lecture. And then I record all of my lectures, both the slides and audio, and I put it online for them to see. Everybody can access these, actually. So this is just an example of our web page that we've set up. I have each lecture topic, some reading or listening, so blog reading or podcast listening. The blog, of course, has an archive of articles now that are very useful. I give the slides up ahead of time so they can download them and look at them in class. They don't have to print them out. And then I make a video cast afterwards, which they can use on other devices. Now, I was surprised to find, parenthetically, about 2 years ago, that a professor at the Indiana University of Pennsylvania was using This Week in Virology as an assignment. So he would tell his students to listen to an episode, summarize it, and then submit a question to the show. One day I got all these questions by email, and he then emailed me later, said, I just want you to know that I assigned my class to do this. I really like this objective, to familiarize you with the way that virologists think and approach problems, to help you understand the integrative nature of the science of virology. That's perfect, because that's exactly what it is. And to hear people talking about a paper conversationally really makes it easy to learn, I think. So I do this, I give this as an assignment to my class to have them write and submit a question. Now, while I'm talking about teaching, let me tell you about iTunes University. This is another part of the iTunes store. It consists of lectures by professors all over the world that have been archived here by Apple, and Columbia has its page. Here's the downtown campus of Columbia where I go to teach. I teach in this building here, which is named after Alexander Hamilton. It's a wonderful campus, and you can see there are lecture courses by various professors, and here are my 2 virology courses. They're all archived there. They're very popular, so they show up on the front page. Now, recently, Apple has modified this iTunes University, so now it's an app which you can use on your iPhone or iPod or iPad, and here's the web page for the app. It's free. You can download it, and then you can look in the directory and download courses, and they all show up on this nice little bookshelf here. And they're from all universities all over the place. And here's the listing for Columbia, so you can see earth science, virology, cell and molecular biology. So here is my iPhone with my iTunes U, and you can see you can download courses, and then it tells you when there's a new download. And if you click on my lecture, you will see, on my course, you will see all the lectures that are videos, and you can listen to each one of them on your iPhone. So right there, it's immediate, it's accessible, and more importantly, it's free. Now, just in the past week, Apple has featured my course on iTunes University. So this is the interface if you have an iPad and you open the app. They rotate through 3 or 4 courses every week or so to feature them at the top here. And you can see ours was featured on iTunes U. And this gave us a huge burst in downloading because it's hard to discover material here. There are thousands and thousands of courses, but this was really, really very nice. So I teach using all of this new media, and I share it with everyone. Everyone gets to see these lectures. They're on my blog, they're on a website, and I advertise them. I think it's really important that people learn. Now, a lecture is different from a podcast, and it's not for everyone, but both kinds of learning are there. Let me tell you what other kinds of tools I use to teach. I use Twitter. Twitter, of course, is a microblogging platform that many of you are familiar with. It is a good way to get more interested listeners or readers. So whenever I write something or do a podcast, I make a tweet about it, and I have many followers who wait for that and look at it. I find it's a good place, as I said, to spread the word. What I get from Twitter is not as much as what I give in. I don't find as much on Twitter because I don't think there are that many scientists there. They're mostly writers and other individuals looking for information. But you can have a very interesting conversation there as well. Recently, someone posted the top 100 scientists on Twitter. This is, I don't know how their criteria worked, but these were these were the medical science top 12 out of the 100, and you can see we are here as well as some other microbiologists and biologists. So there are at least 101 scientists on Twitter, maybe more. But I haven't found a lot of use except in promoting and spreading the word. Same for Google+, which is a more recent iteration. It's sort of like Twitter except that it has no limit on the number of characters. You could actually write pages and pages here if you wanted to, so it's a little longer format. So again, I post things when we publish, when we make podcasts. Here, a listener had suggested that we post papers ahead of time so that they can read them, so I started doing that here, and you can see people can respond. Here, a podcast with prerequisite reading. That's a first. So that's my use of Twitter and Google+. So where does this all go? Do I just keep doing this? Well, I think this really works for science, and I would like to make a company called MicrobeTV Productions Incorporated, where we will put all of these podcasts. We will have a person to do the tech work, so that will relieve me of a lot of it. We will have people to come with me, like Chris, whenever we travel. We'll do live streaming video. We'll have a chat room during the recording so people can post comments. This is just an example of a video we did recently with Rich Condit. We're talking about DNA replication. So we start out with us, and then we go to slides and talk about the science involved. So we'll make it interactive. We'll include all 3 of the podcasts you've heard about, maybe some others as well, and your podcast. If you want to make a podcast, we'll do it for you. You just sit down at Skype, we'll record, we'll edit, we'll post, and we'll get revenue from advertising and share it with you. So that's my vision for a business model for MicrobeTV. I think science podcasting has a lot of growth left, and if scientists can do this, it would really work to educate the public. Can you do this? You can all do it, just a matter of whether you want to. It's not for everyone. Blogging is cheap and easy. It just requires your time. And if you did a post a week on something you know about and you can write intelligently about, that would be very useful, I think. The podcast, you need some equipment. You have to make some investment. You have to have microphones and a mixer and a computer if you're going to do it properly. But it's possible. As you can see, we've had some people imitating us and doing it as well. I wrote an article about this actually 2 years ago. I gave a talk about this at the SGM spring meeting, I believe it was, in Edinburgh. A.J. Kahn had invited me to that, and I wrote that up as a paper in PLOS Pathogens in October 2010, if you want to read more about that. So you can do this, and for example, this is where we do my podcast. This is what I call the TWIV studio. It's my office at Columbia University. It's been taken over by computers and audio equipment. The way we do this, of course, is by Skype. I sit here and other people join in the conversation by Skype. I put each person on their own Skype channel, which requires a separate computer. So I have 3 separate computers for Skype. That way each channel is very clean sound. We mix them together and record them on a laptop. So as we have advanced in our efforts, we've gotten more complicated. And now I want to move to the next level. I have a technician here all the time managing this and doing the editing and looking for advertising as well. I think as a model that can work for science to bring people, to bring science to the public. So that is all about scientists teaching science. I really think we are the best qualified to do that. Science writers have an entirely different role. They have a role of describing in a sort of superficial way science for the public, and they write great stories, many of them. But no one can talk and write about science as scientists do. We have the insight that no one else does. And so for those of us that have the time and the ability and the inclination, you can do it. You can teach science. As you can see from our efforts, it does work. And I am still a working scientist. I do research, we have grants, and so this shows that you can do both. You can do research and you can teach at an effective level. So that's why I'm really grateful to have received the Peter Wildy Prize, because it validates my approach that I can do both research and teaching in an effective way. So thanks very much for listening. Do I just go away or wait? Okay.
Thank you very much, Vincent. It's tradition for SGM Prize lecturers that we don't ask questions after the presentations, but are you here for the rest of the meeting?
No.
You're here for some of the meeting?
Some of it.
I think there's quite a few ways that you can get in touch with him, I think, by the sound of the presentation, if anyone wants to ask him any more. But it's been a fantastic presentation, so thank you so much. The award for this is a lovely folder, but inside the folder is a very attractive certificate, but an award of £1,000 in dollars, so more than 1,000. So congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will have to have a photo take. Thank you very much.
So again, thank you, and I want you to know that this money is going into the podcast. Thank you.